of looking at financial impacts of COVID-19, looking at some very, very preliminary, very, very estimated numbers, as we do not have any hard numbers, and we won't have hard numbers for a couple of months. So Sonia, you are our star for the day.
Thank you. I just saw an email come through from Shannon about the invite. Do we need to help her with that before we get started? I didn't read the whole email. I just kind of saw it flash through that she had declined the meeting earlier.
All right. I did not get a copy of that email.
I can, well, I'm not the host anymore. Demetrius, are you still on? I'm wondering if he could send the invite to Shannon. Sessions.
Yeah, I can.
Thank you. Okay, I can get started. So earlier today, I did send you a memo that summarizes what we'll be talking about today. And I'm going to try to share my screen here to show that memo. Can you see that now?
I can.
Okay. So there's a major financial impact that is estimated to hit the general fund, mostly due to sales tax revenue decline. And how I calculated this amount of 3.7 million was to look at the typical receipt of sales tax for the past 3 or 4 years and forecasted how much we would have expected to receive in 2020, a forecast sales tax revenue, and then use the percentage that we normally receive in that month, but then decreased it by these following percentages. So for instance, March, we typically receive a certain amount, and I decreased that by 30% because the impact of the COVID-19 really didn't hit until the latter part of March, where everything was shut down or closed down. I've increased my assumption of the revenue reduction in April to 50%. And that from the previous meeting that we had, I believe on March 16th or March 26th, because after that March 26th, it was decided to shut down all construction. And I think you can still sell cars, but it's very restricted. I think it's online only. And those are pretty big revenue sales tax generators, is construction sales tax and car sales. So I increased that estimate to 50%. And then it goes down a little bit, 30% reduction in May, 20% reduction in June, and so forth. So throughout the entire year, because the economy is going to be hit for a while, it's probably going to go all the way to 2021, depending on when we can finally get things back to normal. So that's a $3.7 million hit to the sales tax revenue, which is 16% of the total sales tax that was projected to come in for the year. So that's a substantial amount. Also, there's going to be a hit to admission taxes. People will not be going to the movie theaters. They actually can't go to the movie theaters at this point in time. So I estimate a 50% reduction of the forecasted amount for admission taxes, which is another $360,000. And then also the recreation centers closed down right now. Worked with Lynn Sordell and his staff to estimate what that impact would be. And that's about a $600,000 hit at this point, assuming that they reopen in June. That's 20% of the total recreation and parks revenues for the 2020 year. And then also an additional impact to fines and forfeitures. That's red light enforcement cameras, school zone cameras, traffic tickets, and so forth. I've increased that. The last time we met, I had assumed a 5% decrease, and that's been up to 10%. So that's about a $500,000 impact decrease. So the total hit to the general fund of $5,160,000. and that's 9.3% of the total general fund revenues forecasted for 2020. In addition to that, there'll be revenue impacts to business license fees if businesses do not continue to operate or cannot afford to continue to operate. Also permits and development fees, those might be deferred, but they also might go away. So those amounts have not yet been determined. They're difficult to project at this time. Any questions on the impact to the general fund? Okay. There's other funds that will be impacted as well. And one is the Transportation Benefit District Fund, which also has its own sales tax. So I use the same 16% reduction in the general fund for the TBD sales tax fund. Yes.
My mic was off. You had asked about questions on this.
Oh, sure.
The reduction in April of 50%, did you go by each category, such as automobile sales, and then figure that out? And then you did another category, figure that out. So it's not just across the board, we're figuring 50%. Some will be stronger, some will be less, or what? What was the method of figuring that information out?
I didn't go to the level of the source of revenue, but I can definitely do that. I just went to the total sales tax because it hits everywhere. Our largest, of course, is retail sales tax, but I didn't go to that level of detail of the category of sales tax.
No, you don't need. I was just wondering, this is fine for now for us just to get a good idea. Yeah. And then when you talked about the reduction of recreational fees, do we have an offsetting reduction in employees being paid, or is everybody being paid full price at this point?
We definitely have a reduction in the recreation expenditures. Lynn Sordell has laid off all of the part-time staff that would have been working now and would have been working in May. Lifeguards and such. So we do have some layoffs that have occurred already. So that amount, the reduction of expenditures is in the expenditure section of this report.
Right.
Included in there. So. Okay,
thank you.
Yeah, Lynn has gone through a very detailed analysis with his staff line by line of what expenditures are going to be saved by closing down the recreation pavilion, including utility bills and things like that, and part-time staff. Okay, so the other funds, besides the TBD fund, the Criminal Justice Sales Tax Fund 105, that gets its own sales tax, and the decrease I've assumed there is 16% of the total sales tax that comes in there, which is about 130,000. And then the Lodging Tax Fund, I spoke to Grant Dole, and he's assuming a 45% decrease in lodging tax revenues. So I'm assuming the same. He has a better handle on hotel occupancy and so forth. So that's a $400,000 hit to the lodging tax fund. So total reduction of revenues that are anticipated for the city overall is over $6 million, $6,155,000.
Director Springer, I've got a question.
Yes.
You know, the city of Tukwila was in the news, and they've done already some severe cuts, like shutting down a fire station and everything. But the point I'm bringing up is that it was reported that they assume revenue losses of $6 million to June, not for the year, but just through the second quarter. And they're pretty similar to us as far as sales tax revenue. And so I was just curious, are we too light here? Are we, I don't want us to scare things, but at the same time, I think we need to possibly be more conservative. I'm not sure what the feeling is of other folks. And then in addition, you know, we are looking at, again, the I-976 loss of tab fees, which is over $1 million, if that is upheld by the courts. Anybody else have a thought?
I do. I would think that Sonia is more adept. I understand what you're saying, George. I think that Sonia is a little bit more adept to what we're doing in detail as opposed to Tukwila. We should probably keep track of that, but it looks to me, from what I've seen so far with the report, et cetera, that Sonia's done an excellent job of giving us working figures that, you know, it's pretty hard to come up with exact figures, but it looks like it's pretty good figures as far as I can see, getting us going forward, and we'll adjust as we go along. But it was a good point you're making though, George.
I did compare notes to the city of Tukwila. They touched base with me, and I didn't know exactly what their methodology was, but they had told me that there was and ours is almost 6 million when you look at all the revenues. I don't know, see there is over 6 million, but they said that they were assuming a 15% reduction of sales tax. So that extrapolated to 6 million for them. And I don't know if they did it by month or how they did it. But if you say it, they only did through June, then that's what they did. But anyway, so this information is really hard to forecast, and it will be updated, and that's probably why you want to meet at least twice a month, the finance committee, to be updated on what actually is happening. So the January sales tax just came in the end of March, and that was 2% higher than January of 2019, but we were projecting a 4% increase. So it still is, it's 2% below our forecasted sales tax for January, but January wasn't really impacted locally anyway by the COVID virus. So, and I will keep you up to date as the sales tax comes in and revise my numbers accordingly. These are just ballpark estimates at this point. So until the sales tax comes in, and making it more difficult is that Department of Revenue has extended the due dates for sales tax to be paid by the businesses. So it's probably because of that, it probably will be felt much more, it's going to be a lot less at the beginning of this period of time if businesses can opt out of not paying their March sales tax until July or something. So it's difficult to predict until the actual sales tax starts coming in from the Department of Revenue. Okay, so the mayor did request that the department directors put cost controls in place, and that includes a temporary hiring freeze. So no new employee positions are going to be considered. And hiring to fill vacant positions is very discouraged. He's reviewing every single new hire or request to fill vacant positions. And then also we were instructed to delay or forego the purchase of non-essential equipment, goods, and services, as well as to discontinue any non-essential training and travel. So in addition, the department directors were asked to identify specific expenditure reductions that they can make from their adopted budgets. So they spent a lot of time looking at their budgets and what's actually spent and what they can save throughout the rest of the year. So there's several vacancies in the departments. And so by keeping those vacant, we can save almost $1.3 million. And then eliminating non-essential travel and training for the various departments, that's about $168,000. Reducing consulting costs, that's $30,000. That's basically out of my budget. That was designated to do an efficiency study for HR department. We were going to use part of that for performance measure reporting, but we are going to be postponing that to 2021. That's a $30,000 reduction. And then eliminating non-essential goods and services. And that amount includes utilities and other cost savings from the recreation department. They went through, like I said, line by line, and most of that is from their department there. And then also, Bill France has identified some cost savings in the street operations fund. And there's a vacancy, or there has been vacancies in there. And so he expects that there'll be savings in the street operating fund, so we can decrease the transfer from the general fund to the street operating fund by $100,000. And then also Bill Franz is here on the line too, and he has determined that some of the capital projects can be deferred or discontinued or delayed to another time. And those projects total 1.3 million. I believe he sent an email about certain capital projects that could be delayed. So that would reduce the transfer that we make from the general fund to the capital funds of 1.3 million. So the total savings that we've identified so far is over $3.2 million.
Director Springer, this is Ian. Sorry if doing this off my iPad, I'm kind of limited on being able to switch back and forth. So my apologies if you've already outlined this clearly. So when we're talking about reduced transfers, is reducing transfers to the EDIF fund also been identified?
It has not. That is a policy question that the council can discuss.
I think we need to. I know the EDIF fund transfers are something we do for future, very significant and important future infrastructure, for future generations. But as far as a cost controls measure, I wonder if we don't put it on the table and just see how that helps our bottom line.
Yeah, the Finance Committee, actually, Christine probably wants to talk about that, but the Finance Committee previously talked about this, at least not transferring the permit revenues at this time, because the permit revenues should cover the cost of the employees that are doing the work, or the consultants that are issuing the permits. So Christine, you go ahead. I see you've unmuted yourself.
I did, because I was at one point, I don't have all of these various worksheets in front of me, but I believe you ballparked a number earlier on, or maybe I just dreamt that in one of my nightmares. But I do recall that we did talk about that. And Ian, it's addressed a little bit in the next paragraph down, talking about what we can recover from that. So I think that's definitely on the table, and we'll know within the next couple of months if we need to pull that trigger.
Now, the permit revenues that were transferred to the EDIF fund in 2019 were a little over $400,000. They weren't significant, but according to David Kleitch, if construction is allowed to begin, there's some significant permit revenues that could be generated in 2020, particularly to the Home Depot site and some other large construction sites. So that could alleviate and help the situation by having the permit revenue left in the general fund.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I do want to just note that I'm not typically for using one-time monies for ongoing expenses, right? That's not something we do. It's not good financial policy. But given that we were still spending money in this vacuum of not really knowing what the actual impacts are yet because of the lag in sales tax, et cetera. So we are kind of operating in this float where we're definitely going to burn for several months before we get to actually see what the true impact is to revenue. And so I just, I kind of echo some of Councilmember Hurst's sentiments, just in the sense that, I don't want to be alarmist, but I also want to see what we can do to get as close. And I know that Director Springer, that's asking you to pull the crystal ball out a little bit. And so it's not necessarily a fair expectation, but I mean, anything we can do to help us float that transition from what we are estimating to what the actual is. So thank you.
One of my concerns, Sonia, is that the total of these expenditure reduction savings, they get us only about 6% of our budget. And I think we're gonna need more than 6% trimming of costs. And I'm not sure where that's gonna come from. But I'll just put it out there that if we're looking at a 16% reduction in revenue, I would hope we could at least meet that halfway with cost reductions.
Yeah, and there still are other tools we can use to consider. There could be some offered voluntary unpaid time off. There could be retirement, early retirement incentives, things like that, that we have not pursued yet. We were first going to see what expenditures could be reduced initially by doing this exercise first before we start looking at other more serious things.
Can you expand a little bit on the possibility of the COVID-19 stimulus package number 4? I'm not familiar with that one.
You know, I might ask Art to talk about this because he's more on top of that than I am, but there has been 3 stimulus packages, federal stimulus packages presented. And there is a talk about a 4th one that would help local governments. And Gina has been on top of that. I filled out a survey last week about what our expected revenue shortfall was and what percentage of the budget that was. Filled that out. And so that's the League of Cities, National League of Cities that requested that information. So I don't know what they're doing with that information. We're hoping that maybe there is some assistance for local governments. And maybe if Art, I'm not sure if you have any more information on that.
Let me unmute myself first. Yeah, thank you. Just talked to I asked Gina the same question and asked her to give me the latest and greatest update on what's going on in DC. So at the end of last month, Congress, President signed off on a $139 billion pot of money meant to help states and local governments. But that was money that was to go to the states, not directly to local cities like our city. And the assumption was that very little of that money would filter on down to the cities. So just a couple of days ago, there was a bill introduced in the House to allocate $250 billion that would go directly to cities. The National League of Cities is strongly advocating for that bill. So that is just now on the table in Congress, in the House, because a lot of cities are saying that, you know, they need relief directly because there's going to be people who's not going to be able to pay their property tax, and that affects the property tax collections of cities. People are not going to be able to pay their utility taxes, et cetera, and are going to be delayed in paying their business license fees, et cetera. So this just happened this week. So we're watching this very closely to see when and if this package passes. And even if it passes, it'll take a little bit for it to filter down to the cities. But yeah, certainly we're watching that very closely. We're working very closely with Congressman Larson's office. So they are bird docking that piece of legislation for us. So that definitely is on the table, and lots of cities are advocating for that along with us. We signed off on a letter in support of this legislation.
Art, this is Julieta. I'm sorry, I have a question. What bill number it is? Do you know?
The amount of money?
No, the bill, the number.
Oh, I
the
don't know
bill.
what the bill number is. I can
Okay.
find out from Gina what the bill number.
Okay, thank you.
But it initially was put on the table in the House on Tuesday, and then I think on Tuesday. So we'll see if I can get you the bill number on that.
Another thing that we are pursuing is our business interruption insurance that we have through our old CIAW insurance policies. We are pursuing that specifically with the recreation department, or the recreation building closure, the pool closure, and the golf course closure. We could see some recoupment of funds in those categories, from those categories. Under our insurance
I can
policy.
answer Councilmember Crosby's question. It's House Bill, it's HR 6467 is what's being forwarded right now. And actually, the Senate, the Democrats in the Senate don't want to go right now for some reason. And then, because the first CARES Act, as far as cities go, it was for cities of 500,000 or more. And so that's why the NLC is pushing for additional help, because it ain't helping us right now.
Yeah, you're totally correct, Councilmember Hurst. That's the issue, was the cutoff point of the population.
Okay, any more questions on this part of the memo?
What was that insurance again? CIAW?
Yes, CIAW Business Interruption Insurance. Karen Fitzum and Debbie Carver are on top of that, filing a claim. Actually, a claim has already been filed, and I understand forensic accountants are going to come visit me on how we're calculating all the losses. So,
Oh, good.
And then Councilmember Jim Smith asked to see the status of the 2019 revenues in the general fund, a summarized list. And this is this first one shows the categories of general fund revenue. And I noticed early on that licenses and permits were underperforming, and that is an ongoing concern. But I believe they will come back where they were supposed to come back in 2020, assuming that we can still have construction projects go on. But we're short in licenses and permits. But another major factor included in there is business licensing. And when we changed to the Department of Revenue business licensing system, they changed the due dates of the business license fees. So we normally would have received a lot of the business license fees in December, but we're receiving them now in January, February, March for 2020. So hopefully it's just a cyclical pattern of revenues coming in that we'll see in 2020. But permits and land use fees and all those fees were down compared to 2017 and 18. And then taxes came in about 47.3% of the budget, which I usually like to forecast about 48%. So they were a little bit lower than what we had forecasted. And intergovernmental revenue is, that's came out at 45%, almost $3 million. Charges for services, the largest component of that is recreation fees. They were a little bit below projections. I guess when the recreation department forecasted their revenues to put in the budget, they included sales tax, but that's not technically a revenue. So that's a little bit lower than what we had put in the budget. Fines and forfeitures was the only source of revenue that was higher than we had anticipated in 2019, coming out at 52.2% of the budget. And that's traffic tickets, red light enforcement, and so forth. Miscellaneous is miscellaneous, which it's a combination of many different revenues. Came in short as well. So the total revenues that came in 2019 were about 45% of the total 2019-20 budget, which is short, lower than I'd like to see. Usually it should be about 48%. So we are a little short on actual revenues received in 2019. And then this is a breakdown of the taxes. So this is what came in 2019 of the category of taxes. That most of them are okay. Cable came in a little bit lower than what we had projected, as well as utility tax and telephones. It's always going down. It's hard to project how many people are going to be shutting off their landlines, but more shut them off than we anticipated. So, so total, and then you've got the property tax, which we have a really easy time estimating that because it's a levy and the levies usually come in. It's just a timing difference. So the rest of our levy will come in next year in 2020. And then retail sales tax came in at 47.47% of the adopted budget. So any questions on these, on the revenue information for the general fund? And this is a piece of the fourth quarter financial report. So you'll see the rest of it at the next meeting in April, the Finance Committee meeting in April. We'll have the entire financial report available then, fourth quarter.
Yes, Sonia?
Mhm.
Oh, I was wondering about one situation, and that is right now everything is doom and gloom, rightfully so. But we've seen in the past, it seems, that if we have a sudden temporary depression, that then when things get loosened up, we have a boom. Are we taking consideration that particular boom? Are we doing anything in order to create that boom? Make sure that people know that Linwood's a place to shop and carry on and spend your money, or have we gotten that far? I know there's a lot of stuff to be going through, and we don't know what's, so has anything been considered about an economic boom when this is over?
I can comment if you like.
Thank you, Art.
Let me start with, I have a niece who works for Nordstrom at the mall, Alderwood Mall. And they just ended, she's been laid off for 3 weeks, but Nordstrom has paid her for the full 3 weeks up until last Friday, I think. And she's got to go on unemployment. So what she's hearing is that once things get a little bit better and the governor lifts his business close order, that somebody like Nordstrom is probably going to have a very, very aggressive marketing campaign, some kind of COVID-19 special or something to get the consumers to start coming back to spend money. Because essentially this boils down to consumer spending, because prior to COVID-19, the economy was going pretty good, wasn't it, Sonia? Revenues were coming in pretty good. It was when the governor ordered his stay-at-home policy that consumers were told to stay home and therefore couldn't put money into the economy, and then businesses were told to shut down. They couldn't sell anything. So it all depends upon, when that order gets lifted and when we kind of get back to a normal business cycle of such. But how quickly consumers and businesses start to do what they normally do in a good economy, that's the million-dollar question. How quickly will the economy bounce back? David Kleitch was of the opinion that the developers out there can't wait for the order to lift because they're eager to get right back to doing what they were doing. Because as you know, construction activities kind of stopped too. So it's a really good question, Councilmember Smith. That's the million-dollar question. How quickly can the economy rebound? Because many economists see similarities between this downturn and the downturn that happened in 08, 9, 10. But there is a big difference, because the difference back in 08, that there were structural problems with the economy. The economic downturn for this recession is strictly related to COVID-19. So hopefully all these little signs we're hearing, like, the curve is flattening, the military is taking down that temporary hospital they set up in CenturyLink Field. The numbers in the county are flattening. Hopefully, maybe Trump will get what he wishes and he can open up the economy sooner than later. But we're all just waiting, and all we can ask our finance folks to do, like Sonia, is to monitor the economic situation as closely as possible. Because we don't know. We don't know if Tukwila is right. We're not 100% sure if we're right. The answer is probably somewhere in between. And I suspect that we will cut as much as we can cut short of laying people off, because we are hoping to avoid that situation. And so if we can get close to closing the gap, if it is $6 million or whatever, we get close to within $1 or $2 million of closing it without laying anybody off, I suspect the mayor will recommend to council that we dip into the revenue stabilization fund, because the whole purpose of that fund, as you know, is to address short-term downturns of a year or less. And that's how we're looking at it so far.
Yeah, well, and I agree that it'd be nice that we get back to the revenues that are normal as soon as possible. But what my point is that, like, if someone has been just dying to buy their new Maserati,
So that's me.
and that's you. Well, I didn't want to use names, and so if people or a new car here in Linwood, and they were just about to buy a car, and then everybody's shut down. I would think that we're going to, and auto sales has been a big part of our revenue source, if I'm not mistaken. And so it'll be nice if we actually get a big boom when this is starting to slow down, or we're starting to open businesses back up.
Yeah, and I think the county is thinking along the lines of how you're thinking, Councilmember Smith, because the county is just now putting together this county economic recovery task force, which we're hoping to get 1 or 2 limited representatives on that task force, like David Kleitch and somebody else.
Okay. Can we, and something that was not on the report, but I think that we should be also discussing, and this is from Council Member Altamirano Crosby, how much money do we have in the emergency fund? And do we have alternatives for the water and sewer at this time? There was about 4 questions in particular from her note. Sonia, did you get that? I'm not sure if you received that.
I did receive that, and that to be able to write off businesses' monthly utility bills is really not legal at this point. It could be considered a gift of public funds. However, we do have low-income programs for individuals, and I've spoken to Bill Franz about possibly extending the due dates, or not assessing penalties for late payments, not shutting businesses or individuals off for not paying their bills. And I don't know if everyone knows this, but ultimately the payer of the utility bill is on the landlord, the owner of the building. So businesses that do not pay their bill and quit or discontinue business, it's on the landlord who pays any bills that have been unpaid. Otherwise, we put a lien on their property when they sell it. So, and maybe Bill wants to, and they asked him to attend this meeting if that subject came up too. There are reserves in the utility funds, and there's low-income programs, but there's a maximum amount set for those low-income programs because other utility bill payers absorb those costs of the utilities that the other, the low-income payers are not paying. So, and maybe Bill, do you want to expand on that? The utility bill proposal to reduce businesses' utility bills?
Yeah, I think Sonia made some good points there that I think are accurate. It's an interesting question. One thing we're not quite sure the impact of lots of businesses being shut down and not purchasing as much water will have somewhat of an impact on the revenue that's coming into the utility. So that's a concern also. So to look at self-imposed ways then of decreasing revenue to the utility makes me nervous as someone who's in charge of the utility. So that's another concern that Sonia didn't voice. We do have, what do we have, 5 or 6 different programs that are out to assist customers that are struggling, and we've added more lately. I had a quick talk with City Attorney Rosemary a couple days ago and kind of chatted through this and talked about this question. I guess it really depends on the detail of what we might be interested or trying to do. She says it depends. It might be illegal gifting. There possibly could be ways to do some things. You know, the real devil is in the detail of what it is we're trying to do, how we define it, how we decide whether someone meets the criteria. You know, how do we set it up with caps to protect the utility? There's a whole ton of detail in there. So I think my message to you is we're not saying heck no, but we just have lots of real cautions. And if we do want to explore this some, we'd want a lot more detailed discussions about what it is we're really trying to accomplish, and see if there's some way to get at that in a way that's quick and can be administered well, and that has some controls on it, and that wouldn't endanger the utility. Because Sonia is very correct. We have all the costs still. Someone has to pay those costs. And if we, you know, my concern with COVID is you kind of have your first level impacts, and then there could be subsequent impacts that end up impacting lots of people. And how deep would it go? You know, so those are some more thoughts I wanted to add. And of course, I can answer more specific questions too.
Hey, Bill, I've got a question. If we're not selling water, then we're not having to buy water, right? Because
yeah, that's true. I mean, that part of our carrying costs would go down, but we still have all the pipes to maintain and the staff to pay that maintains the pipes. And, you know, so it's a very complex system. At this point, we don't have real great estimates yet, but we'll know as this kind of goes along how much revenue impact there may be.
Sure. Okay, and we don't have that with any of the other utilities, right? Do we have the same concept there with electricity?
Well, we don't run those utilities, so you know those are not city utilities.
Okay,
they're probably having similar concerns, I would imagine. You know, with businesses boarded up or shut down, you know, less use, less revenue.
So, Director Franz, I know that we always try and piggyback on. Oh, it's okay. Can you hear me?
My phone rang and it interrupted things for a second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I know that we always try and piggyback on other programs as a way to be efficient with the administrative costs of different programs. Would there be something that we could do where, you know, pending review by city attorney for clearing it, but is there something we could do to maybe increase the budget of some of those relief programs to include some kind of voucher if you can show proof of unemployment? Like if you're drawing unemployment from the state, maybe there's some kind of equitable voucher program that could be employed as well. I don't know what that looks like, but you know, I don't want everybody just going, yeah, times are tough, I want a discount on my utility too, because that's not what the program's for. But if we could say, hey, if you've been recently unemployed and as proof you're drawing unemployment benefits from the state, we would be willing to say add a little bit to the bucket of making things a little bit less painful. Is something like that maybe something that could work or function possibly?
Well, I think you're correct that we when we set up these programs, we try to either piggyback them on something or set it up in a way that's simple to administer. So something like that you described would be the lines of thinking we'd go into. You know, when the last several that we put in, we put a cap on them, and the way the cap is works is we people get a rebate at the end of the year, because that way people are free, that everybody that qualifies puts an application in. We have a rate that they can get a discount on, but we have a cap. So if we have fewer people, everybody gets the full amount. If we have more people, it exceeds the cap and people get a lesser amount of rebate. it kind of goes against what we're trying to do here, because here people need it now. And so it probably wouldn't be all that helpful to say, well, at the end of the year, we'll figure it out and shoot you some money back. So, that's one concern I have about this, because, what if things get really ugly and half the citizens are unemployed? Would we put a cap on something where that says something more to the effect of just the first 300 applicants can enroll in the program and then we have to shut it off? And, that raises questions and concerns. And then I do want to preface all these discussions we're having now. Rosemary very clearly said, this makes me really nervous. I want to think more about this and, decide if it's legal. And so I appreciate being able to have this kind of conversation with you, but I don't want to get hopes up too high, because, if we come up with ideas like this, she might still have real legal problems with it. So it's a complex thing, as you know, because we've been through this several times before, and it's always very complex, and it takes a while to figure out the right way to do it, to make it easy to administer, to make it to make it have a good effect, and to protect the utility, that we don't end up causing ourselves a real problem with revenue.
Right. Well, one thing I would like to mention on programs that we want to put in to help people during this crisis is that the Attorney General has put out a ruling that we can use public funds. It's the gifting of public funds is basically not a concern if we're doing it to reduce the impact of COVID-19. I mean, he put that out on March 17th. So we do have some leeway. So I think the concern of gifting public funds is should not be a restriction on what the council wants to do. If we have to make sure it's to, reduce the impact of COVID-19 or assist people. And in the discussion of Director Franz, when you mentioned unemployment, and this might be for Director Kleist, well, it is for Director Kleist. Is there a way to find out the unemployed, how many are unemployed in Linwood right now? I know our system is overwhelmed as far as the work source, so we may not have those stats. But I think in coming weeks, we kind of need to get a feel for what's going on in unemployment in Linwood, because that would affect, like Director Franz mentioned, future utility bills and everything. And then also, does Director Kleist have a feel for possibly the businesses, that are closing down? Some of these questions are long-term, but also we have to, face reality. And if we're looking at loss of sales tax and we think we're going to rebound into nirvana at the end of this, I don't think it's going to happen if we lose a third of our businesses within the city. And not to be gloomy, but when you talk to first responders, sometimes you get that. In the 911, we had an emergency board meeting yesterday with the 911 system. And one of the issues that we were faced with is the 911 system. We are setting ourselves up to be able to have a backup call center. We have actually two now. We have two centers. They are using the 911 call center that's up in Everett, but with COVID, they reactivated the one in Montlake Terrace so that they would have a separation of people in case one of the centers, all of a sudden the people got sick, and we don't want our dispatchers to get sick. But the thought process is now, well, we also need to have a possible third portable way to, if one of those centers went down, we need to have an emergency one. Anyway, my point is that the 911 folks are looking at this as not a quick rebound. In fact, the Everett Chief of Police or Fire Chief was talking about a possible 6-month impact of COVID-19. And I think we have to start thinking about too the psychological impact of COVID-19. Are people going to want to go out? Say we have a reduction in the deaths and we are going to open up more towards the end of May. Are Are people willing to go out to movie theaters right away? Are they willing to go out and make big expenditures, knowing that they lost their jobs so quickly? And some of them are not going to have their jobs come back, especially the restaurant industry. So I just, why am I rambling? I am rambling, but I'm also saying, I have no fear of being conservative on what we are trying to look at as far as savings. Thank you.
Chris, you're muted.
Well, should be. George, regarding the gifting of public funds from the Attorney General, what day did you say that came out? Because I'm not finding it, but I might have wrote it down wrong.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It's March 17th.
I can't find any release from his office on March 17th.
I can forward it to you. How's that?
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
You know, the other
Uh-oh.
The other thought as I think about that, the utility is an enterprise fund. It's different than a general government fund. All costs from the utility are paid by ratepayers for the specific purpose of, supplying water and sewer and so forth. I think that's an excellent question for the city attorney, whether that kind of lifting of gifting would apply to the utilities or not. I wonder about that.
Bill, did we kick around an idea a while ago of setting up a fund so that people paying their utility bills could kick in an extra $100? Or did we determine that that was just a big thing to manage?
Yeah, we did look into that. At one point, we thought that probably the only and best way to do that would be to find another agency that the funds could be directed to, and we explored that some. And I'm trying to remember exactly all the reasons we stopped pursuing it. It got very confusing and kind of difficult. And I think we found some other ways that we thought were better administered with some of the newer programs we put into place. So that was kind of dropped.
Okay.
But I do remember it got very confusing on how that could be administered. And I don't remember also if there were some legal things. Was that even before you, Sonia?
Unless it was brought up recently. I know that you have to have a third party monitor that. In discussions with other utilities, you can't do it yourself. You have to contract with a third party.
And there's likely a cost to that and all that fun stuff. Okay. Julieta, did you want to ask some other of your questions that are on your list?
Well, I would like to see if we can consider any of those suggestions that I send the email. I'm sorry I don't CC everybody. I think that I CC Sonia only, and the rest the city councils and Mayor Nicola. So if you can share, Councilmember Frisell, the ideas. I'm new in all this, so I was thinking about what all of those possibilities could be working.
Okay, I can read through them. I think we have addressed some of these. It says, I would like to get information on water, sewer, and general emergency funds with the purpose of seeing if it is feasible to possibly defer utility payments to people who are not working because of business closures. I think we're working on that with the attorney and talking about gifting of public funds. The next item, I will be requesting the budget for water and sewer along with the total approximate revenue from those utilities each month. I can get you budget numbers and perhaps Director Springer, we could get Councilmember Crosby, the Tyler transparency tool, if that would be helpful, or if you're just for a higher level overview. What are your thoughts on that?
We will be covering the utilities revenues for the fourth quarter report, which is coming to the Finance Committee in a couple weeks. And then also, last year, we did not actually print a hard copy budget book for anyone. But if you look online on our website, there's the budget there. You can find things, type in utilities, and it'll come up. Do you have a hard copy of the budget, Julieta? Or is that what you have in your hand?
Sorry. I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, I thought I saw a big book there. So it's 500 pages. So 501 to be exact. We didn't really print out that book, but it's available on our website, and you can find out all kinds of information about the utilities on our online adopted budget book. And Janella can show you at a different meeting on how to scroll through that. It's indexed pretty well, and it's pretty user-friendly to use. But we will be covering utilities at the next Finance Committee meeting on actual revenues that are received every year, whether they're sewer, water, stormwater revenues, and the budget for those.
Thank you. And I would like to add, I mean, I am aware of the program for seniors, the 30% discount in utilities. And thinking about right now in all these crises, I don't know if we can offer any percent of discount to all the people, the citizens of the community here in Linwood. So.
Yeah, and I think that comes with what Attorney Larson is working on for us to figure that out. You also had a question, as for businesses, could we prorate their payments based upon the number of days that they are closed? If closed 10 days, pay a third less on their utilities, 20 days, they pay 2/3. And if closed the whole month, perhaps a free ride. And I'm a little hesitant about the free ride with the conversation that we've had here. You also mentioned this might also tie in with business licenses for next year. If this isn't possible, I would suggest not to charge businesses any late fees due to the COVID pandemic. I think we're all in concurrence that waiving of late fees, is there any discussion about that? Or does that follow the policy we currently have in place?
Currently, we are not charging late fees to anybody who pays their utility bills late. We could consider extending that. I'm not sure, Bill, how long we have put that in place or extending or forgiving late fees.
I don't remember what the document said. I have no problem with frankly almost any length of time. I think that's something that's probably would be considered not gifting. So I think we can, that's one we can definitely work with if it already isn't suitable to what you guys would want.
And we also have payment arrangements available to anyone. If they can pay $100 a month and they can't pay their whole bill, we arrange that individually with each business or individual who needs time to pay their bills.
Does that further impact our fines and forfeits account by not assessing late fees and not collecting them? Or is that held in the enterprise fund?
That's held in the enterprise fund. It's all revenue to the utility fund.
Okay. Well, we'd really appreciate it if you could get your crystal ball out of the shop. That would be very helpful. Does anyone have any other wonderful suggestions other than the crystal ball suggestion?
Well, I might say that this information that we received has been very useful. The conversation's been very useful. And at this point, we need to take it all in, let it settle a little bit, and then we can come up individually or as a group or as a team, as far as some suggestions, some ideas on what we can do rather than, so I'd like to think about this for a while and then we can discuss more.
Super.
Corbett,
Hi, Corbett.
say something.
I don't want to get interrupt the committee's discussion and council's discussion. I appreciate what you're trying to do here very much and take it very serious as well. I was just going to add a little bit of caution in terms of things are changing every single day now. This is so dynamic that it's hard for us to even conceive of the right program to offer citizens or businesses because tomorrow something new happens and we're still waiting to see now what the federal assistance is going to be for small businesses. We learned earlier this week the governor has established a new program. I think it's up to $10,000, which is a grant, not a loan for businesses. What we are doing is helping to support our businesses by helping them know all the information that will help them find the resources that are for them. We haven't yet thought of ways that we can afford to be a life ring for all of our businesses, but we are wanting to help them survive and persevere through this because that's how we will jumpstart the economy when it comes back, as if these businesses are still there and still functioning. And I would just remind us that we're only about 1 month and we will want to use our time wisely. And as staff, I would only ask that the council really pinpoint the things that you want us to focus on as staff. We have hours in a day and we're very dedicated to do everything we can to support our citizens. But I sense we can, if we had to research and propose 5 hypothetical programs, this 1 or 2 that's really probable, that would be a great use of our time. And so I would just offer that as an ask and thank you for letting me speak.
So if I may, to that effect, I think maybe 2 things, council leadership, since you're represented here. A couple things maybe we're looking for, or at least I'm looking for as a member of council, is 1, when we might expect to need to take action on authorizing the use of the rainy day fund. So just kind of getting a timeline when we might start thinking that is something we might need to do or might not need to do. And then also come up with a mechanism to clearly identify to staff what we think we need to prioritize, and maybe kind of give staff our top 4 or 5 bullet points as far as like our policy directives are in this time, like whether it's small business preservation or it's relief funding to utilities, whatever those directives are, but maybe we come up with a way to clearly articulate and communicate that in a succinct manner so that staff can focus their time. Because I think strategic planner Corbett Locke's comments are well taken. There's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot that staff is doing right now. And communication is going to be the thing that helps the city survive and thrive through this time. So I think we just want to make sure we're coming up with a way to clearly communicate as a body. So.
Mhm.
A question, Sonia and Corbett, perhaps you could, is there some way that we could find out if what small businesses are distressed at this time? Or because at this point, it's kind of hard to knock on everybody's door and say, oh, how you doing? So do we have any mechanism to do that?
I would answer that by saying probably nothing formal at the city level. This is where our chambers of commerce and the Economic Alliance can be great conduits of information for their membership. We have, we're here and we respond to inquiries, but to my knowledge, we don't have yet the impetus to reach out and say, how bad is it at this time? That's all I could add.
Yeah, and the chamber and the Economic Alliance, they're just a percentage, a small percentage of that, of all the businesses. So I don't know, I'll ponder this, think about it, because it'd be nice if we could, if nothing else, send out to the businesses to let us know if there's a problem so we can get a good handle. It would be confidential, of course. We can get a handle. So if we know what the problem is and we know where we want to go with it, then we can come up with a plan perhaps. So,
yes,
you.
I know that our economic development team was looking in to see how many of our businesses we have email addresses for from their business license information, because that's we wanted to blast out information to them that
Sure.
what's available and what resources they should be aware of. That so we can go on that. My point is, and find out what comes of that research.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would support that. That'd be great to have an email blast sent out to businesses to just ask, are you still open? You know, what do you foresee? Can you last 2 months, 3 months? You know, that type of thing. And I was hoping that, and I don't know if Director Kleist can do it, but is there a way to get unemployment statistics for the city through Workforce? Or and then my last is, when will be the next finance meeting that we see an update of expenditure reduction that the departments have come up with?
Yes, we can give another update. Is it March or April 23rd? I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah. If we get any more, because it is a fluid list. As people think of things, department directors think of ideas about what they don't really need to spend in this budget cycle. Definitely, there's been a stop on travel and training unless it's essential, like for police. Sometimes they have travel or training that they are required to take. Basically, we put a stop to that. And as vacancies occur, it's going to be difficult to fill them. So that's a moving number as well. And we'll see some change if it's decided that we can open up the recreation pavilion. That will make a big difference as well.
Yeah, and Sonia or Christy, if I could add also, in addition to the council having this kind of special discussion today, when normally there is no meeting on a Thursday afternoon, the mayor also has directed us to put on her weekly Tuesday agenda when she meets with all of her directors and leadership team. The two items that she's focused on right now is COVID-19 and budget. So every week we will be monitoring and having discussions and coming up with ideas on ways to close the gap and ways to find out, you know, how businesses are doing out there. You know, maybe Corbett, we can do a survey of sorts, you know, of businesses. But we're like talking about this like every day.
Right. I think it'd be great if we could get businesses to respond and give us information, but I see some challenges with that, with the number of businesses that are considered non-essential. They're not open. I don't know how much they're communicating. I'm not sure that we would get enough of a response that we could rely on that information any more than by just waiting it out. I think it would be great if every business owner knew, yeah, I'm closing my doors, or no, I'm going to be in business and I don't know how long I can last. I know that with the small businesses I deal with, those questions are still very much up in the air. as we try to figure out which loan option they might be eligible for, and how many of their employees are on unemployment and what does that look like. And it's a lot of effort for businesses to be able to project that and do so in a reliable way that we can go, oh, okay, we know that there's X number. I just don't want us to spin our wheels on a project that I don't know if we're going to get any better information than just picking a percentage out of the air, unless somebody else has some other input on that. I'm not sure that I'm ready to direct staff to spend a lot of time. This is the Chamber of Commerce book here, and as I look through there, there's 2,500 businesses listed in here, and that's a lot of phone calling and or emailing, and a number of these companies aren't up and running right now. So
I'm aware that David Kleitsch, his staff is working on communicating with all the businesses regarding their business license fees and so forth. Terry Meinecker is doing a big research project on that. And hopefully she's gathering email addresses or some easy way to contact these businesses, because she's following up with them on their business licensing. So I will follow up with David Kleitsch and see if he has any feeling on what businesses are going to be closing and so forth, because that reaching out by Terry Meinecker might result in some information that we could use.
If I
That'd be
could
helpful.
add something to that.
Hey, Shannon.
Here. Hi, guys. Just to let you know, if it makes anybody feel better, I did hear from Terry for my small business in 2 different ways. So the city is reaching out to businesses directly through business license stuff. So that was encouraging, I thought. So just so you know.
Good.
Chris, on another subject slightly, there's another meeting of the Finance Committee on the 23rd. Is it going to be continuing with this information, or are you going to be specializing in something else? The reason I'm asking is that if this conversation is continued, then we need to make a motion to make it into for those of us that want to participate, we need to make it into a regular council meeting.
I believe COVID-19's on the topic of every meeting we have in this city. So I will work with Beth and we'll get that scheduling motion that needs to happen.
Okay, can we do that right now?
No, we cannot. I don't believe that we can.
I think we can, to make a scheduling motion, because this is I'll leave it up to you. I think we can, though.
Okay, I'm not sure, and I think it would work just as well to have it on Monday night.
Sure.
Okay. And I think I'm hearing the gist of council. Do we want to make every finance meeting from here on and until COVID's over with a special council meeting, since we will be discussing financial impacts?
Yes.
One head nod from Jim.
I would like that.
George, yes. Ian, yes. Okay.
Julieta, yes.
Yes. Okay, I'll make that happen.
Christine, I might suggest having that topic the first on the agenda, so the other topics that may not be of interest to the rest of the council, they can leave, because we get pretty detailed in some of the financial analysis and so forth that they may not be interested, but they're willing, you're welcome to attend the whole thing, but we'll always have that the first thing on the agenda, I would recommend.
Okay. And it was very helpful to me to see the email copy ahead of time. It started my thoughts going. So if you have something put out in an email, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and
if you update the numbers.
Yeah, I apologize for sending it so late, but literally I was getting information from department directors yesterday afternoon on expenditure reduction. So I usually like to give it to you a week in advance. But
Sonia, this was perfect. It was short, concise, to the point. Thank you very much. It was very professional how you did it. Thank you.
no, you're welcome.
All right, any closing comments? Nope. All right, we're done at 4:14 in the afternoon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonia, and send our thanks to your staff as well.
Yes, thanks to
Definitely.
Noah and
Thank you.